I was Doris Jean Smith Shuster, and I was named for my Aunt Doris because she helped my mother out the summer before I was born, and she was my mother's youngest sister. And my middle name, and since they didn't want to get me mixed up with Aunt Doris, they always called me Jeannie. I was always Jeannie. Jeanie, not Jeanne, the way Jeannie spells her, our Jeannie spells hers. So that was my nickname, always.
I didn't know that.
I was always Jeannie.
What?
Aunt
I feel
Jeannie.
like an idiot. Amy told me your name was Doris, and I said, I thought it was Jean.
Well, I never went by Doris because of my Aunt Doris.
Okay.
They didn't want to get me confused with Aunt Doris,
So
because she was in elementary school yet when I was born, I think.
Did you ever have a nickname of any other sort?
No.
Okay.
No.
When and where were you born?
I was born in Falls Creek, Pennsylvania, which is a little town near our home in the country, and all the other kids were born at the farm, and I think my mother thought I would be too, but she went to town that day, not expecting me to be born because I was a 7-month baby. And she started having labor pains in Falls Creek, and my aunt lived there, so she went there. And they called the doctor, and I don't know whether the doctor got there or not, but I got there. I arrived at my aunt's house in Falls Creek, Pennsylvania. 2 months early, according to my mother.
How did your family come to live there?
In the Beechwoods? In the Beechwoods? Well, it's a long story. The Osborns owned the land in that area. The Osborns, we were related to the Osborns on both the Smith side and the Crawford side. So everybody was heading toward, all the relatives, I think, that came to this country were heading towards, they were originally from Scotland, and then the king said, we need to send people from Scotland over to Ireland because there are too many Roman Catholics there. And that's what they did. And they sent the Smiths and the Crawfords both went at the same time. It was in 1760 or something like that. Or 1670. It was 1670, I think, that the King of England ordered this. And so they had to go there. And so they were in Ireland for a while, and they didn't like that. So they eventually came to this country in around between the 1800s and the 1830s. Both my Smith and Crawford families came. And they ended up in the Beechwoods because that was where the Osborns had land, and there was an Osborn relative on both the Smith side and the Crawford side, so therefore, and they got the land, I think, fairly a decent price. That everybody bought 300 acres at that time. Yeah.
Do you know how the land got to them in the first place? Was it like William Penn or something?
It was some kind of a land grant. I'm not sure how. But through this Alexander Osborn, who was the originator. And then there were other Alexander Osborns down through the... In fact, my brother George told me recently that the house he lives in was the original Osborn family house, and I didn't know that. And he said that once this great-grandson or great whatever grandson came home from California, and he stopped by there and he said, I was born in this house. And he played football for one of the big teams in California. And I don't know his name, but he was an Osborn, that's all I know. I didn't write that down, so I don't know that.
What town?
That was in Falls Creek.
So that,
again,
but that's not where you grew
up. Where
I
was born. No, that's the town where my dad delivered milk, though. We delivered our raw milk there.
Okay.
Door to door.
But you lived in?
Beechwoods. It's a farming community.
Oh, okay.
Between Brockway, Du Bois, Reynoldsville. Farming community. And it's all mostly Scottish, Irish people.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I always thought Reynoldsville. Well, I guess that's the close.
That's the address.
Okay.
We were RD2 Reynoldsville. And that's where I went on Saturday night. I went roller skating every Saturday night with my girlfriend, and her dad. One of our dads would take us, and the other dad would pick us up.
Is there like a roller rink?
Roller rink. Yeah. It's still there, Dal said. I asked Dal about it, and he said it's still there.
Wow. They still roller skating?
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah.
So were there other, tell us about the other family members in the area.
Okay, I had two sisters and 2 brothers. And my brothers are still living. My sisters are gone. But my older sister, Margie, and then I was second, and then George, and then Shirley, and then Dal. And Dal was my baby brother, and Shirley was my baby sister. And I took care of them because I was 8 years old when Aunt Shirley was born, and I was like her favorite sister.
Yeah.
Anyway, and the same with Dal. I was 13 when he was born. So I got flowers from him the other week. It said from your baby brother, Dallas. He's only 76 now.
Now he lives where in relation to where you guys live?
He lives in a farm in the same area.
Okay.
It's part of Beechwoods. It's a farm that my dad bought when those folks were, well, the grandparents died, and so they were selling the farm, and my dad thought he should have 2 farms, so he had one for each boy, one for George and one for, because they believed in sending their daughters to college, but they believed that boys should be farmers and own the land, because in Ireland and Scotland they couldn't own the land, mostly, unless they were very wealthy, you know. So they wanted the boys to have land. So he thought he should have 2 farms, so he'd have one for Dal and one for George.
I wonder how they came up with the decision to send the girls to college, only the girls.
Well, most of the people in Beechwoods did send their girls to college, and even back then. I mean, now my mother didn't go to college, but she did teach school. But she was very bright, and she went to a summer school thing that they did. But my dad's sisters all went to college.
Huh.
They sent them all. They were wealthier, and they sent them all to college. But they believed, it's like we told our girls, you know, there may never be a man to help take care of you. You may need to take care of yourself, and so you need to go to college. So.
Do you remember how much it cost?
Well, when I went, it was $400, and I think it was for a semester. And now when they went, I have no idea when it was. They went to Clarion State College. I don't know what it was. I think all of Steve's sisters went there, or most of them anyway.
So, but when you went for about $400 a semester, so $800 a year.
Well, it was either $400 or it was $400 for the year. I'm not sure which, you know.
Okay.
But a lot less expensive. It was a lot of money then, yeah. In those days it was.
Anything you could compare it to? I mean, did you remember what, I don't know, food or gasoline or cars cost at the time, approximately?
Oh, gasoline was very cheap.
Yeah.
Maybe 25 cents a gallon, I'm not sure.
Okay.
And we sold milk for 12 cents a quart back then, door to door.
So what would be a half gallon? Because I don't know what a quart.
Half gallon of milk. A quart is a half gallon is 2 quarts.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 24 cents?
Yeah, for a half gallon.
Interesting. It's sort of relative, I think. A lot of it's kind of, it's all similar in relation. What was the farm and the house like? How many rooms, bathrooms? Did it have electricity, indoor plumbing, telephones?
Okay, we had the earliest. We had the first bathroom in the Beechwoods, according to my mother. And
how many houses were the Beechwoods? I mean, was it like 10 farms or 20?
Oh, 40, 50.
Oh, okay.
There
so
was a lot of farms.
large.
A lot of farms, yeah.
Okay.
It's a large area, and still there. And the church is still the focus. That was our social life, the church. And the school was right beside the church. The high school was right beside the church. And what was the other question you asked?
Oh, it just was about the house. How many rooms and bathrooms and electricity?
Okay, there were, later on, there were only 3 bedrooms to begin with, but then my dad had, someone owed him money for the milk, and so he always traded off. And, they did carpenter work and built on 2 bedrooms and a sunroom in the back of the house. Well, you've been there, haven't you been there? You may remember.
Yeah, when I was young.
Yeah, but the 2 bedrooms upstairs, one for the girls and one for the boys, were what extra we had. And so we had 5 bedrooms altogether, and we had just 1 bathroom. But later on, they had a bathroom put downstairs when my mother and dad were, I think after my dad got not able to do things, but they got the bathroom downstairs. half a bath, you know, a sink and a commode.
And you had running water and electricity and telephones?
We did. Telephone on the wall and running water as long back as I remember. Now we sometimes ran out of water because the water was from we had a well, and we also had what would we call it? It wasn't a well, but there was water running in the basement. It came through a stream somehow, and I mean, we had water running in the basement. We had a well, and that was when the spring water wasn't, when we didn't have a lot of spring water, because we had the spring water coming in right into the basement. And when we didn't have a lot of spring water, then we used the well water.
So they built the house around the spring, basically, and it would kind of trickle
the house
up.
was there. The house was there. The house belonged to my great uncle. He would have been my half great uncle, because my grandfather's father died when he was 30, leaving him an only child with my grandmother on the next farm. My grandparents lived one on the next farm to us, that was my dad's family, and one across the dam, that was my mother's family. So we had relatives all over the place.
Right.
Lots of relatives.
Were there any special things in the house or any special items that you remember? It's asking.
Oh, we had a wonderful fireplace. And the house is no longer there. They tore the house down and built another house there. And I said, I wonder what they did with the fireplace, because it was the kind of stone that my mother picked the stone out. It was stone that had little pebbles in it. And it was different. It's not your regular stone, you know. I don't know where. But they had it over in some section of the county, and she had them bring it up. She wanted that. And here again, it was someone who did that kind of work and who owed my dad money for the milk. And, you know, it was Depression times, and they didn't have money to pay their milk bill, so he often did that. They often helped with the summer crops and things like that, too. And the other thing that we loved was our kitchen, because this was done by a man from Falls Creek who did carpenter work, and he built this fantastic cupboard set that he just made in town, and he brought out and put it in the kitchen. And it had all the cupboards clear to the ceiling, and it had drawers, and had, you know, the whole works, and it had a little table that came out and opened up where you could close it. You know, we thought that was the cat's meow. I remember when they did that, yeah. And I often thought about that when they tore the house down. Gee, did they take those cupboards out and use them again? I mean, that would be a shame if they didn't. But I suppose they were long gone, maybe.
Hang on 1 second.
Okay.
Hey, can we quiet it down just a little bit? Everybody's forgetting. Okay. That's all right. That's okay. Thank you. Kids running around. It's like your house at Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Okay, so you want my duties then? My duties.
You know, I think it asks a little bit about that, about allowance and things. But yeah, go ahead. What did you have to do?
Well, we all had chores, and see, I would rather do the outside chores than the indoor chores. My sister preferred doing housework, so we ended up, first we took turns, and she would do what I did on alternate weeks. But then we decided that she would do the housework and I would work in the milk house, which is washing the bottles in the evening that had to be filled the next morning to go to town with milk in them. So those were my jobs. And it was not much fun on a cold morning, because in the evening we had a fire going in the boiler in the milk house, and I'm washing the bottles on 3 brushes. We have a middle brush that washes the outside, and 2 outside ones, and you wash 2 bottles at a time, and you put them on this thing, and it spins around and washes the bottles, and then you put them in the crate where they had 12 bottles in a crate upside down, and you put them through the steamer. It sterilized them. So that was how we washed the bottles. And then in the morning, it's my job to fill the bottles, and it was cold in there because no heat. I dropped a few bottles. My dad was my dad never raised his voice. He was a very kind, gentle man, giant of a man, yeah. And, you know, I occasionally dropped a bottle because it was just too cold. But we had to fill those bottles and cap them and get them ready to go to town.
How many did you usually have to wash?
Well, that's a good question.
Or crates or whatever? I mean, was it
Crates, yeah.
hundreds of, I mean, I don't even know.
No, we had, it was a small dairy.
Okay.
We had probably 15 or 20 crates of milk, yeah, that we took, maybe more, I can't remember. But,
Every day?
yeah, every day. Delivered it every day, even Sunday, yeah. My dad didn't often get to church because he had to deliver the milk.
Were there many other dairies?
We had the Du Bois Dairy and we had the V.T. Smith Dairy that we were up against. And they were bigger. They were both bigger. They were in Du Bois.
Okay. Huh.
But we were local and we were raw milk. We were raw milk. It was not pasteurized. Now when George took over the dairy, after my dad got unable to do it, he did put in the pasteurization and homogenization. He did that. But and in the end it turned out to be too many things you had to do, and because everything was changing then,
Yeah.
So he ended up selling to somebody and he went out of the dairy business.
Okay. What is your earliest childhood memory?
Well, I have to think about that a minute. I had written down I had written down some things that I wanted to tell you about, and one of the earliest memories I had was of a Christmas. Now, we never had big Christmases because my parents didn't have a lot of money. Now, we did usually get an orange in our stocking. That was the big thing, getting an orange. And but one Christmas, my aunts came down they were both school teachers, and they walked down. They said they had told my mother, don't let them open their gifts until we come down because we want to watch them open their gifts. And so they walked across the field down to our house, Aunt Martha and Aunt Eleanor, and they brought presents. And Aunt Martha had made me a blue sweater, zipped down the front, and she knitted it, and and Aunt Eleanor made Aunt Margie's red one. That was the big Christmas that I remember when I was a kid. And and we also had candles on our tree. Now, how in the heck did they do that without setting the house on fire? But I remember candles on the tree early on. Now, later on, we didn't do that. Later on, we had electric lights. But, yeah.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Were there a lot of fires in people's
Well,
houses and things? I mean, was that...
I don't think so, but
Okay.
eventually there was a fire in our house, and that's why, that guy demolished the house. And I mean, I think he could have repaired it, but his wife left him after that happened, and that was the end of the marriage, and so,
Oh.
he ended up with the house, I guess, somehow.
So, can you describe the personalities of your family members? That's one of the questions. If you want,
Okay.
whatever you want.
Okay. Well, I would say that my dad was as I said before, a very gentle man and very kindly, and I never heard him swear, and I never heard him yell at anybody. It was always, we knew that his word was the last word, My mother would say, well, go ask your father. And so, if we said, can we do this? Well, go ask your father. And if father said no, then that was it. That was the final word.
He just said, no.
Yep, right. And there was no argument. You knew there was no argument. But my mother was more...
I don't understand how that worked back then. I do not understand that.
My mother was more in charge person, but she always left him to have the last word. He was always the one to get the last word. So anyway, yeah.
I don't understand why children would listen when I guess they knew if they didn't, they would get a SWAT or something. What was the enforcement?
I got one SWAT at my house, and I deserved it because I picked up a rocking chair and I was pretending I was going to throw it at my sister. And that's when I got the SWAT, so I deserved that. But that's the only time I ever got a SWAT. No.
Amazing. I don't understand how.
No, they didn't believe in that. It was, you just knew that you couldn't do that.
Amazing. So what kind of games did you play growing up?
Oh, well, we played checkers and, that kind of thing. And later Chinese checkers. That was one of my mother's favorite.
I played it with her.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember that.
Later on, yeah, she always enjoyed that. And I guess we played cards. Not much, though. We didn't play many card games.
So go ahead.
One of the things that I do remember well was one of my jobs was to take on days when there wasn't much for the cows to eat in the pasture. Then we would take them up on the hillside, and it was my job to take them up there and to watch them, and then bring them back down. And cows are very easy. You know, there were never no bulls in that crowd. They had to stay in the barn. That would have been difficult, but the cows were very easy, and so I could take them up and bring them back down. Now that was when I was in grade school, probably.
So how would you take them up? Just take one and they would follow?
No, I would just let them out, and I would say, I'd push them along, kind of, and they'd follow me, or where, I might walk with one of them, and then they'd all follow. They just all follow. And we'd go up on the hillside, and they would browse around and eat some, whatever, grass, whatever was up there.
Yeah.
And then about an hour, and then I'd bring them back down before it was time to milk, do the milking. And at milking time, we had milkers. We had De Laval milkers, and they still have De Laval milkers, by the way. And in fact, I went with Ian to observe this new milking system that they have up in Perry County. Did you know about this? They have a system where the cows come in themselves, and they know when they're going to be milked, and they walk in and they get milked and they walk back out, and there's nobody there.
The thing's
It's
attached?
all automatic. Yeah. And they had De Laval milkers.
Wow.
So, they still have them. So anyway.
That is fantastic. Yeah. So, sorry, I'm just adjusting one little thing. Did you play many games outside? Was there a lot of running around at all, or outside
Oh, we played tag, or or hide and seek, that kind of thing. But nothing major. Now at my grandparents' farm, they had a tennis court. We didn't play tennis, but because we didn't have tennis rackets, but they did. They played up there. But
did you have a favorite toy?
I didn't have many. We didn't have many toys, that I recall. I had a doll, of course. Now wait, I have to tell you about this doll that I got. We had a neighbor, and he was a cousin, and they had this farm over the hill, and the McClures, and they had a summer place there. And this one cousin, he was older, he was probably in his 20s, and he came one day, and he had his truck, and he's taking us for a ride in his truck, in the back of his truck. And I fell out. I probably was standing up. I probably got up and looking out or something, and I fell out. And he was so the next day he came and brought a doll for me to make up for me falling out of the truck.
How old do you think he was?
He was probably in his 20s.
Okay.
And I was 4 or 5, and my sister was with me. She was 2 years older, and she didn't fall out, but I fell out. But he brought her a book too, because he knew she was in school already. No, she wasn't in school, because we started school together. Because we had to walk 2 miles to school, and my parents didn't want her walking by herself, and so they held her back 2 years until I could go with her, and then she skipped from 1st grade to 5th grade the first year, because my mother taught her at home. So
when my mom told me, she said, my mom told me about how she had to walk to school 2 miles, and she said, the joke, uphill both ways, in snow, and how difficult it was. But you really did. You walked 2 miles.
I did, and there were some big hills. There were some big hills. Yes, and the worst thing about that was that, and this is probably the saddest part of our lives, was that my sister was raped on the way home from school one time. Mm-hmm. And it was never, I did ask my mother about it later. I said, I remember when they were going to court about it in Brookville, and I said, whatever happened when you went to court that day? Because I was just I was in 1st grade, and she was she would have been in 5th grade, because they moved her from 1st to 5th grade that year. But anyway, but she was only, I was 7 and she was 9, I think. Or I was 6 and she was 8, one or the other. Anyway, I asked my mother whatever happened at court that day, and she said, well, they said, well, boys will be boys, so that's just the way it is. And that's the way it was. And there was no counseling, no anything, you know, it was just the saddest. It was very sad, and my sister had problems ever after, you know.
This was an adult boy?
Because there was no counseling, and
An
it was
adult boy or teenager?
it was a kid in school, an 8th grader. And he was older. He should have been out of 8th grade, you know, but he was older. But yeah. But anyway, it was one of the saddest things that ever happened, and it was certainly, you know, changed the whole dynamics in the family. It was just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And I remember I think back in that time they were saying that, and my sister had problems with mental problems later on, and I remember them saying, oh, well, it's the mother's fault if the child has mental problems, it's the mother's fault. Well, that's a crazy thing to say, but anyway, I remember my Aunt Jane, my dad's oldest sister, writing my mother a letter and saying, do not blame yourself. It is not your fault, you know, that Margie is having mental problems. And I remember, because I was, you know, we were older then. That was when my sister was in her 20s that she ended up in a mental hospital. So, yeah.
Was she diagnosed with something particular?
Schizophrenia.
Okay.
Schizophrenia.
But that's not from a cause. That's not from an incident.
No, that's
it's a brain.
It's a genetic thing,
right.
And there was a lot of intermarriage in the Beechwoods because, you know, where did you, in a horse and buggy, how far did you go? You know, there were no cars then. And so they usually married within the Beechwoods. And I said, if I had gone home and probably gotten a job in teaching up there, I would have probably married somebody there. And so that's why it was a good thing that I married Steve and got out of that genetic thing. Yeah. Didn't think about it at the time. It was not in my mindset to marry somebody out. But that's the way it happened. Yeah. We got to the beach once in a while. My aunts would take us. I mean, and we went one summer. And see, my Aunt Marie lived in Media, which is near Philadelphia. And so if we got there in the summer, then they would see that we got to the beach. And that was the time that, when you were talking about Wilmington, I was thinking about that because she wanted to take us on this boat ride. And I think I was about 10. And I know George was with us, and Shirley was a baby. So, well, Shirley was 8 years younger than I, so maybe I was 8. Shirley was just a baby. And we were on this, it was, I think, what do I want? They take cars across the river or something, a ferry boat. It was a ferry, and she wanted us to stay up on top to watch us come in. Well, we did, but my mother knew that we had to get off at a certain place, and so she had gone down to get off with Shirley in her arms, a baby, and she got off, and the rest of us missed getting off. So we had to go to Wilmington. We got off at Wilmington. That's the only thing I know about Wilmington, Delaware. But then her husband had to come and pick us up in the car.
How did you get to their place? On a train or
no, we
car?
drove down. My dad was there too. My dad and Uncle Vaughn they went to the ball game that afternoon, and we went to Aunt Marie took us on the ferry boat ride.
How did you, I mean, did you guys have a car, a sedan type of car? And was there a highway then, or?
Yeah, there was a highway to Philadelphia, yeah. It was a long day's travel. But
Turnpike?
Yeah.
Or?
From Du Bois area down there. I can't remember how long it took, but I think it was an all-day thing. I'm sure it was. How
did you learn to swim?
I didn't learn to swim until I went to college. And that's another incident. When I was 10, my uncle drowned in the dam. You know where the dam is from our farm.
So.
And we were having a picnic at our house, and it was Smith family picnic. And so when they came over, usually they would stop. And it was my Uncle Dave Crawford, and his girlfriend and another girl was with them. There were 3 of them. And they didn't stop. They just went on down to the dam. And he drowned that afternoon. He wasn't a good swimmer. And there's a place in the dam where the original creek ran through, and it's deeper than the other. And I guess he stepped off of that, according to the girls, that's what they thought happened. He stepped off of that and he went under and he couldn't recover to get out. And I remember they came yelling up to the farm to say that they needed help, and we called the fire company, and there were firemen there and everything, and it took them till 6 o'clock that night to find him. But they did, and meanwhile my parents sent me up to my grandmother Smith's farm, next farm, so we wouldn't be there to hear all this going on. I presume I was about 10, I think, when that happened, so that was pretty scary. He died, yeah. It was one of the sad things, too.
Did you have an allowance? Did you get paid any money for anything, or how did you get money?
No, we didn't have an allowance. We didn't have an allowance. It was just if you needed. I mean, we did get to go to the movies every once in a while. Shirley Temple, the big movies. We enjoyed Shirley Temple, and the kid movies that were going around, and we got money to do that if
just
occasionally.
As needed, you were.
As needed, yeah.
Here's some money.
Yeah, we didn't get allowances.
What was school like?
Well, I went to a one-room schoolhouse, and after the incident at the Crawford School, then my parents arranged for us to go to the Smithtown School, which is in the other direction, and then my dad drove us to school every morning because he was going to take the milk that direction, and then we walked home, and that was about 3 miles walking home. Yeah, and but it was a one-room school, and the teacher taught all the grades from 1 to 8 and every subject. And we even had a picture study on Fridays. They would take the pictures around to the different schools. There were different schools in the Washington Township district, and they would the pictures would get passed around to all the schools so everybody got to see them. And then we would have what they call a picture study on Friday. And we would also you had to learn a poem every week. All the major poems, we had to do that, and they had a potbelly stove in the center of the school building, and the teacher had to take care of the fire. She had to take care of getting water there. I mean, she'd have the older boys go up and get water from the spring across the street, and so that we always had water for people to drink in the school, and that kind of thing. But the teacher was responsible. I mean, she had to clear the walks off in the morning when she got there. So, and I mean, it was a major. And I know when my mother worked, she got $30 a month for being the teacher, and she sometimes had 60 kids in that school.
I was going to say it was one room. How many kids?
One room. Well, I don't think there were ever 60 in my school, but Mother had 60 one year when she taught. She taught at the. I'm getting the school district where she taught. I can't remember what it was, but there were 60 kids one year. And I think she taught at Smithtown one year, and that was the year she had 60 kids, because they ended up taking a few of the older boys out of school and sending them into Falls Creek to school because they thought that was too many for her to handle. Although I think she did a pretty good job of it. But yeah, they taught all this. The teachers taught all the subjects, and they called first grade readers and go up front, and they sit across the front in a long kind of seat, and then everybody had their own seats, but you went back to your seat and did and meanwhile you're listening to everything that goes on all day long, so you learn things that the 8th graders are doing, And
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was good.
So there's some benefits to it.
It was good, yeah. It was not a waste of time, no.
Huh. So even in first grade, you're hearing things that are more advanced, and you're used to it more by the time you get there.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
What were your best and worst subjects?
Well, I like to read, and of course I still do. And I do a lot of that. And I guess, in the end, when I went to Indiana, I took, first I went in music, because I had a nice voice. However, I didn't have the good ear that I should have had. And in fact, I did sing for my graduation. I sang a solo for my graduation. But, and my music teacher inspired me to go to Indiana to school, and that's why I went there, and that's where she had graduated from. And I spent a year in the music department and decided that was not, didn't have the good enough ear for it, and so I majored in chemistry and minored in mathematics, and that's what I did. And then I never taught chemistry one day I substituted at Greensburg High School because the teacher was ill, but there was never a job in chemistry. So therefore, I went back to school and got my master's in counseling, and I really enjoyed that. That was later.
Any school activities or sports that you did?
Well, I played basketball in high school. We had a girls' basketball team back then. And we had a track team. We didn't have football at our school. It was a small school. There were only 25 in my graduating class. I suppose there were around 100, maybe not quite 100 kids in the whole school, high school, which is 9 through 12. We didn't have junior high in those days. You know, you went to 8th grade in the one-room schoolhouse, and then you went to high school. And everybody went to the same high school. And so, yeah, I got a first prize once in the standing broad jump. Standing broad jump.
Standing?
You stand on the thing,
Yeah.
you swing your arms, and then you jump.
I was good at that too. I probably got it from you.
Well, I remember you doing the jump over the
pole vault.
pole vault. Yeah, I remember that.
In lower
We
grades,
came to watch
we
it.
had standing broad jump. Well, okay, and where? I'm sorry. What was the high school? What was the name of it?
Beechwoods High School. Beechwoods High School, and it was a vocational high school. They had home economics and agriculture,
Okay.
which was good for our farming community. Yeah. So the girls all took home economics, and the boys all took the vocational ed programs, the carpentry and everything that went with it, and the farming and all that. And it was perfect for where we lived, you know. It's no longer there. It's no longer there.
It's not.
No.
Did many of them go on to college?
The girls did, yeah.
Okay, so most
Some
of
of the boys did. One of the boys in my class, in fact, he just died a couple of years ago, and his name was Verbeck, and he lived up on the hill above us. When you're coming to our house, you could look down and see our farm, and they're up there on yonder hill. And he was in my class in high school, and he went to college, and he went to Penn State, and he eventually became a professor at, I think, a New Jersey college. And he's the one that kept our reunions going forever. And when he died, the reunions fell apart. We don't do reunions anymore. But most of the boys were farmers. They expected the boys to be farmers, you know. That was the whole idea. Of course, the war changed some of that, you know, and the war came along, and then people were moving away from the beech woods and doing other things. So radio was big, but we didn't have television then, you know. But we did have radio, and I remember watching listening to Little Orphan Annie, and what are some of the other ones? The two black guys that were on had a program. What were their names? Boy, I can't even think of them anymore. But there were programs that Amos and Andy,
okay.
Yeah, Amos and Andy, right. And programs like that we always listened to every night. And my dad always listened to the fights.
Was there radio ever since you were little? I mean, did you?
Seems to me we had radio.
Okay.
Yeah, for a long time. Yeah, I don't remember how early we got it, but.
Did you have any pets?
Yeah, but not indoor pets. We had a dog, but it had to be outside, and we had cats in the barn that we fed milk to in the barn. But no, we weren't allowed to have animals in the house.
Any names of any of the?
That came later. Well, there was a Bonnie dog next door at my grandpa's house, and she would come sometimes to our house, which was interesting because I think one of the times she came was when my mother was up there, and she came home with my mother, and then she stayed for a while, and then we took her back because that's where she belonged. But I remember the name Bonnie, and so then when your mom was little, we had a dog, and we called her Bonnie, and it was a collie, same as that dog had been. Yeah.
I've
You heard about
hearing
Bonnie?
about Bonnie, yes.
Can I tell you about a scary time? I think I must have been in high school because I was raking the hay with a rake and one horse. Have you seen those apparatuses?
Is that the thing where
Yeah,
there's gears or something?
No gears, it's just a
Oh.
plain rake with these things that go around, and then two wheels and a long thing, and then it was an early rake, and one horse to pull it. And we had Bill and Nora, I think the horses were in those days. They were black. And Bill, now I can't remember whether it was the girl or the boy that was pulling the rake that day. But anyway, a thunderstorm came up, and she got scared. I think it was a girl, and Nora, Dora, one of those names. Anyway, and she got scared, and she ran. I fell off the rake. She ran with the rake. The rake, she eventually got untangled from the rake, and she ran up to the next farm. And then the storm was over, and we did get her back. But that was pretty scary.
Did it get going pretty fast with you on?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
You jumped off, or you fell off? Or?
I can't remember whether I fell off or whether I jumped off, but it was pretty scary. It was one of the scariest times, yeah. That was, I'd say that was probably the scariest. Well, another scary time was when they were thrashing, and that was, no, maybe they were making hay. I think they were making hay because they were putting hay into they were bringing hay in on the hay wagons and putting it into the hay loft. And we were little kids, and we were up on the hay loft, which is higher than the hay where you put the hay, but a higher, and the thing that goes across from two lofts. And we were up there watching, and my brother George fell down to the barn floor. And he was unconscious, and it was a very scary time. So he was probably 4 or 5, and he was up there with my sister and me. We were supposed to be watching him, I guess, and he must have looked down over the edge and fell over, and we didn't get him. It was a very scary time.
He landed on the regular floor, or
Not
dirt, or?
not all the way down, but on the barn floor where they had brought the hay wagons.
Did it have
hay wagon
on?
in?
Or was it pretty
It's
much
like a
wood?
floor, it was wood. It would, yeah.
So he woke up
Yeah.
eventually?
Well, they took him to the doctor in Reynoldsville, and he did. And he wasn't in the hospital. I'm sure he had a concussion, but it was that was a pretty scary time too. Yeah.
But he grew up fine and no?
Yeah. He was he served in well, not because he was too young for the World War II, but then he joined up after, and he was in Japan for he and 3 of his buddies all went to Japan, so that was nice. They were together. So, but that was after the war. That was the Japanese thing after. Yeah.
What was your religion growing up, and what church, if any, did you attend?
Presbyterian Church in Beechwoods, and it's still there, and they're going strong. And it was the center of all our social activities. Yeah, we had you had parties. The Sunday school classes had parties, and they always had something going on. And so there was that was our social center.
And were you ever mentioned in a newspaper? Was there a newspaper locally?
It was the Du Bois Courier, they called it. And yes, I was. I won a contest once. We had to write, this was for the Elks, I think, or one of those organizations. what Uncle Sam means to me. Well, I won the first prize, and I got $100. It was when I was a senior in high school, and that was in the paper.
$100?
I did put that in the paper, yeah. So that helped me go to college.
Yeah. That's like getting $2,000 now
Yeah,
or something.
yeah.
That's tremendous.
Yeah, it was big.
Wow.
I don't know whatever happened to that essay, because I don't have it anymore, so I guess Mother had it, but I don't know that we have it anywhere.
What world events had the most impact on you while you were growing up?
Well, of course, World War II, yeah, because well, I graduated from high school in 42, and 41 is when we got in the war. And
Was there much
December.
going on before the bombing?
December.
Before Pearl Harbor? Was there much, did you hear about tensions?
Oh, we weren't going to get into the war. We were not going to get into it. We were staying out of it. But that brought us into it. Front and center, yeah. And everybody went. Everybody signed up. Everybody wanted to help out, There was no reticence about that.
Did it have any personal effect on your family or people around you?
No, because my brothers were younger. They were too young to go. And I had friends who went and friends who died. Yeah, from high school. They were older than I, but yeah.
Describe a typical family dinner. Did you all eat together as a family? Who did the cooking? What were your favorite foods?
Oh yeah, my mother did the cooking always. We always ate our meals together. Not breakfast, because my dad was probably in the barn doing milking when we were having breakfast and getting ready for school. But on weekends we always had dinner together. And in the summer when they had extra hands to help with the crops, like the haying and the silage and so on, then we'd always have extra people at the dinner table. And my grandmother sometimes, my mother's mother, would sometimes come and help with the cooking, because there'd be a lot of hands to cook for, And then as we got older, we girls helped. But we always ate our meals together, yeah. Even evening meals we ate. My dad would do the milking first, and then we would eat dinner. And lunch, depending on what day of the week it was. And
what type of meals, or what were your favorites, or
well, we always had meat. We were not vegetarians. My mother always canned. Well, my dad would kill one cow in the fall, and one that wasn't producing much milk or whatever, and Mother would can that, and so we'd have beef. And then he would also kill one of the pigs, and we'd have pork. So plus we always had chicken. We had chickens, and so, if necessary, my dad would kill a chicken. My mother couldn't kill a chicken, but she could dress it. But she didn't kill him. My dad had to kill him.
So, but he would kill the a cow. Would he butcher it, or would somebody? How would that go?
I don't remember much about that.
Okay.
I don't know. That was behind the scenes. Yeah, my mother canned it. Yeah, she canned it. She canned beef and she canned pork, and we had meat all winter. They didn't buy much from the grocery store. We had a big garden always, and that was my mother's domain, and then she did the canning. So that was.
Did you have any favorite meals?
Well.
Or anything fancy ever?
I always liked we had birthdays were special. Now, we never had birthday parties, but we always had a birthday meal. My mother would ask what we'd want, what would we like for, and so, although I had a birthday party once, I have to tell you about that. I invited people to my birthday party, but my mother didn't know anything about it. And she had to tell them when they came that, oh, I'm sorry, we're not having a party. It was so embarrassing. But I thought I should have a party. But never had one. So anyway. Oh my gosh, yeah, that was a no-brainer.
Do you remember what you asked for a meal or anything?
Well, I may have asked for pork chops, or I may have asked for meatloaf, or sometimes spaghetti, yeah. But we always, well, and we did have that thing about, well, you should clean your plate, because those Chinese children are starving, So that was that. But the idea was you didn't have to really eat everything on your plate, but if you took it, when we passed the dishes around and you took what you wanted, then my parents expected that we were going to eat what we took. So if you didn't want much, then you didn't take much. Or if you didn't like it, you didn't take any. And that was okay.
Oh, I wanted to ask, did you ever go to restaurants? Were there, did you eat out, eat dinner? No. Never.
I don't
if you're
recall.
traveling, maybe?
Yeah, when we were traveling, but we may have stopped somewhere. Or we may have packed sandwiches to go, if we were taking a trip to like Media, or my aunt and uncle, Martha and Hen, lived in the state of Indiana, Gary, Indiana. He worked out there for a while, and we went out there one summer, and I think we packed food to take in the car. We didn't stop. There was no money for stopping at a restaurant. I was going to tell you about my dad having the rheumatic fever when he was 13 or 14, and left him with an enlarged heart. And at that time, someone bought him a violin. He was quite musical, my dad was. He had a beautiful singing voice. But anyway, my Uncle Bob told me this, that my dad was the hardest worker he ever knew on the farm. He could lift more hay, he could do than anybody. And I thought, well, that is really strange. When my dad had this enlarged heart, how could he do that? And then when he died at 63, and I remember later talking to Kim about it when Kim became a nurse, and I said, do you think he would have lived longer if his dad had sent him to be a teacher, and he hadn't done hard, heavy work like that? And she said, I don't think so. She said, I think that the work maybe kept him living longer. I don't know. Anyway, we were always devastated. We were devastated by his death, his early death, because my grandpa lived to be 91, my Grandpa Smith. So we were not expecting that, but he had rheumatic fever, and I imagine his sister Mabel must have had it too, because she died when she was 33, and it was heart complications that killed her too. So I suspect they had, at the same time, they probably had this. And Christmas was not a big thing, as I said before, and we couldn't afford many gifts. And but 4th of July was always big. We went to my grandparents' house next door, my dad's family, and my uncles always put off firecrackers at night. They did all this. They put all these, and we'd sit on the front steps to the porch, and all the kids, and watch the uncles out there, Uncle Fred and Uncle Art putting fireworks. So that was, and we always had a picnic before, and on Sundays we often went to either my grandmother Crawford's or my grandmother Smith's for dinner. Not every Sunday, but lots of Sunday, in the summer especially, not in winter so much, but
Christmas?
Christmas, we had Christmas at home usually, because, like everybody said, kids like to play with their things if they get anything to play with. But I can't remember. We probably went to one of the grandparents' house early on. I don't remember. I do remember that we had a rumble seat in the car once, and we used to ride in the rumble seat. The kids in the back in the rumble seat, You know what a rumble seat is? Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like near the trunk.
Yeah.
So that there was
but it opened.
Extra room.
It opened up, and it was not like down at the trunk, but it opened up, and then you had a seat there, and you sat there. But then you could close that, so it didn't rain in on that. But I was probably in elementary school when we had that.
Who was the oldest relative you remembered as a child? And what do you remember about them?
That would have been my Grandpa Smith. And as I said, he lived to be 91, and his wife, my grandma, lived to be 89. They were both long livers, yeah. And I do know that he had pernicious anemia, and he had to eat raw liver. And I never saw how he could eat raw liver, but he did. I remember sitting in the kitchen watching him eat it. Well, how could you ever do that?
What do you know about your family surname?
Well, I know that the Smiths came from Scotland, and the Crawfords came from Scotland originally, and they went to Ireland. And Smith, I suppose that's from something that somebody did. Once was a smith of some kind, who did some kind of a job that called for the name Smith after it. I don't know. I don't really know where that came from, or the Crawford either.
Were there any naming traditions in the family, such as always giving the firstborn son the name of his paternal grandfather, or anything like that?
My brother George is George Francis, and he was George for my grandpa Crawford and Francis for my grandpa Smith. That was in my family. And then Dallas came along, and my mother thought she liked Dallas for a name, so Dallas Howard. After my dad. My dad's middle name was Howard. My dad was George Howard. My dad. Okay.
Were there any stories that have come down to you about your parents or grandparents or any other distant ancestors? Any stories that you remember?
Well, I remember stories about both grandfathers who did forestry. They did lumbering early on, because when they came, and when their forebears came, the fields had to be cleared before they could make farms out of them. And I remember that my grandpa Smith, I know, did some lumbering in Louisiana. How he got down there, I don't know. But I heard about that story, and leaving my grandmother with all the children to take care of on the farm next door. And I remember my mother saying that she went there once, and my grandmother had, I think it was either Uncle Art or Uncle Fred, tied to a tree so she could keep track of him. Because she's trying to hang clothing out on the clothesline, drying the clothes, on the clothesline. And so to keep track of where he was, she had him tied to a tree. So that was a good story. I don't think Grandma Smith would like that to be heard, but anyway. Anyway, what else could I tell you about that kind of thing? I mean, my Grandpa was probably the oldest that I can remember. I don't remember any great-grandparents living at that time. So.
And anybody in the family famous or infamous?
Famous or infamous? I don't think so.
Okay.
Not that I can think of.
All right. Mm-hmm. Any special recipes that have been passed down from family members?
Not especially. I mean, but now in Steve's family there were lots. They passed those Czechoslovakian recipes down, and we still use that. But in my family it was more regular fare. I mean, meat and potatoes, and and the usual. So it was never and garden stuff. Yeah.
Any special heirlooms, photos, Bibles, or other memorabilia that have been passed down in the family?
Well, if there were, I didn't get them. Although I did get a chair that came over from Ireland. But you know what? And this is a sad story. When we moved from Oak Hill Avenue to Kenmore Avenue, my husband said, well, what do we need that for? Because it needed fixed. And my mother had given it to us. It belonged to my dad's family. And it was an old-fashioned chair. And Steve burned it. I can still see it in the backyard where he burned it. And it would have been a beautiful chair, but we had to get it worked on. It needed work done on it. And so we hadn't used it, and it was sitting, and he thought that was useless, so therefore. I know.
Oh, well.
But Steve was a very practical person. If we weren't using it, we didn't need it.
What's the full name of your spouse, your siblings, your parents?
Okay, my parents, we'll start with them. George Howard Smith, my dad, and Edna Corrine Crawford Smith is my mother. And Steve was just Stephen Shuster. He didn't have a middle name. They didn't give middle names, except Helen got a middle name. She's the only one in their family that got a middle name. So when we had Lynn, your mom, Steve said, oh, we don't need a middle name. Well, I thought we should have a middle name. So later on, we did give her Elizabeth. And then all my kids did get middle names eventually. But he didn't think we needed middle names.
So he never had a middle name?
He never had a middle name, no.
Wow. I didn't know that.
I guess they didn't in their family. I don't, but now later they did, yeah. The next generation they did. Did I say about my dad, and what a hard worker? Yeah, we talked about that. What a hard worker he was. My Uncle Bob said he was one of the hardest workers he ever knew. And I will say this about my mother. My mother was the kind of person who, I know her sisters-in-law thought she was a poor housekeeper, but my mother worked in the barn alongside my dad. She worked in the field alongside my dad. She helped with whatever needed done. She was not a person who stayed in the house and just did housework like my Aunt Esther. Aunt Esther would never go to, she never went to the barn, where my mother was always there ready to help my dad with whatever it was that needed done. She drove the truck, she drove the tractor, she went to town and delivered the milk. I heard this story once, that mother told me this, that she was in town delivering the milk and she had a pair of knee breeches on, because she was, I don't know if it was in the early days when they still delivered the milk in the horse and sleigh, because they did that, or whether it was when they got the first truck. But anyway, she learned to drive because she was the mail person. Her father was the mail person on his route, and he lost the sight of one eye in one summer. And so he turned it over to her, and she delivered the mail in a horse and buggy at first, and then later in a Model T. And my Uncle John taught her how to drive so she could drive the Model T. So anyway, she had driven the milk to town one day because my dad was busy doing getting the crops in, and Aunt Eleanor was in town, and Aunt Eleanor saw her coming, and so she hurried up and crossed the street so she wouldn't have to talk to my mother, because my mother was wearing breeches, knee breeches. We have a picture of her in them. I never saw her in them, but anyway, we have a picture of her.
Why wouldn't she couldn't talk to her because it wasn't a dress?
Because she was not dressed properly and she was driving a car. In those days, the women didn't do that sort of thing. So anyway, we heard that story. It was kind of cute.
When and how did you meet Grandpa?
Met Grandpa in the spring of 1943. I graduated from high school in 42. The war started in 41. He had already joined the service because he and his buddy had gone to Philadelphia and joined up the Navy. It was a Navy program that permitted him to stay in school until he finished, supposedly, which it didn't. But anyway, they did let him graduate without, they did give him his graduate degree, even though he was not quite finished. But I met him in the spring of my freshman year. Didn't know him before that.
How did you meet?
Well, we had a dance every night after dinner. He went to Rec Hall and danced. They had, on the weekends, they had the orchestra, or the band from the school played on weekends. But during the week they just had canned music of some kind. And we danced every night after dinner. You went there and you danced, if you wanted to, or you stood on the sideline. Well, anyway, it was in the spring of the year, and I guess he said to one of the guys in the music department, "Who's that girl?" And so I got introduced to him, and that was the beginning.
He asked you to dance.
Yeah, he asked me to dance, and I wasn't a very good dancer, and he was very good, so I didn't make a good impression with my dancing. Because we didn't do dancing at my high school. The first dance we ever had was when I was a senior, and we had the first dance we had, and also we had a dinner also. We had dinner and dancing. And that was, I mean, they didn't believe in dancing. The those Scottish Irish people didn't believe in dancing, so we didn't dance at the high school. Now some of the people had dances at different other areas, but I didn't do that. So.
But he had danced a lot.
Yeah, in Limber they danced. Oh yeah, oh yeah. He was very good. He was a good dancer. Yeah.
What did you do on dates?
Well, we walked around Indiana a lot and held hands. And went to the Dell. And we went to the Dell and had a burger. That was probably about it. And that was right across the street from the college. And of course danced after dinner.
Did he impress you? I mean, how did you, what made you interested in him?
Well, he was very persistent. Very. And when I went home in the summer, that was it. I was not going to. And my parents were, of course, against it because he's Catholic. He was Catholic. He was Greek Catholic, which is a different from Roman Catholic. But we didn't know the difference. We just said Catholic. Oh, we no. See, my Aunt Eleanor was engaged to a Catholic man, but didn't marry him because of her parents' objection to that. He was Roman Catholic, and his name was Pat Murphy, the handsomest guy you ever saw. But she didn't marry him. So anyway, I knew my parents were not happy about this. So when I went home that summer, I said, "Oh well, that's okay. I'm just go with somebody else." And of course, it was not a good thing. If I had gone back, like I said, if I had gone back to Beechwoods and married someone from there, who knows what my family would have, how they would have turned out. Half of them might have been schizophrenic. Who knows? But anyway, I didn't, and I married Steve instead. And my dad did not come to my graduation. Because we eloped. We went. My best friend from college set it up for us in Pittsburgh, and we went down there and got married to her church. And then I had to go and tell my parents. And that was, my mother came to my graduation along, and she brought all the kids. She brought Marge and George and Dal and Shirley. They all came, but my dad didn't come. And he was very upset with me. And it took him quite a while to, but he eventually decided that Steve was okay. He told my Aunt Eleanor he's the hardest worker I ever knew. So, which he was.
From your dad?
He was a very hard worker. Yeah.
And your dad was told that he was the hardest worker.
Right. So.
And Grandpa worked even harder, to impress him.
Do you know the story about the bullpen? You heard that. I think you had that on the other tape.
You should tell it.
Well, Dad asked him, he said to Dad, "What can I do to help?" When he was there, this was when he was there for a weekend one time. We weren't married then. And so he was wanting to impress Dad. So he said, "What can I do to help?" And he said, "Well, you could do this, or you could do that. Or how about, would you like to clean out the bullpen for me?" Well, Steve thought that would be an easy job, I think. Anyway, so he said, "I'll do that." So he started. It was a whole winter's supply of the bull being in the pen. So it was, he said, he always tells a story that the manure was up to here, and here was the window looking out. No, it wasn't quite that high. But anyway, there was a lot of manure to get out, and so he had to throw the manure out to the manure spreader and fill the manure spreader, and then they took that out and dumped it, and then brought it back and filled it up again, I think. But anyway, it was a lot of manure. But anyway, he tells a story of how hard what a job that was to do, and it was a big job, and my dad was very impressed. Anyway.
Well, the story I remember him saying was that he took his shirt off because it was hot, and your dad didn't, because they started dealing with hay, and he was lifting it up over, and he couldn't get it up into the hay wagon or something?
This would be the hay. This would be in the summer. Now the other thing was in the spring, and that was before we were married. Okay. And then in the summer he came up, and they were doing hay up on the hillside, where the hill above the barn where it was pretty steep, and the hay wagon was tilted, and pulled by horses, and Steve was on the bottom side and trying to get the hay on and he'd have trouble getting it on, and my dad came around and said, "Would you like a cigarette paper to stand on?" My dad had a sense of humor. How about and he handed him a cigarette paper, because my dad rolled his own cigarettes. He didn't smoke very much, but he did occasionally roll a cigarette. So that's one of the stories that Steve always told, yeah. But the manure was another story, that was a different story.
But I'm still curious, so were you disinterested when he first, or he just kept asking you and said, oh, well, I guess if you keep asking.
Well, he was not giving up. He was not giving up, no, he was persistent. So he kept coming around, and the next year he was still in school the next year because he was doing his student teaching in the fall, I think. And then they called him up, and he had to go in the service. And so he was in the Navy, and of course, I don't know if you know this, but did he tell the story? I think he did, about being being rolled by somebody. We had gone. My sister was working in Emporium, which is another town, and we had gone there. Well, she was home for the weekend, so we had taken her back, and George was driving the car, I think, and Marge was sitting in the front, and she got out, and so Steve and I were in the back seat, and we were on our way home, and we saw these kids, and they were hitching a ride, and so George said, oh, I know those kids from the milk route in Fall Street. He knew who they were because, I mean, he played basketball for our team, and they played for their team, I guess, or something, and he knew who they were. So he said, we can pick them up. So he picked them up. So we got in the front seat with George because it's, in those days, it wasn't a bucket, they weren't bucket seats, it was all across. And we sat in the front, and these boys got in the back. Well, Steve thinks that his wallet fell out of his pocket when he was getting from the front to the back, and they must have found it because he had $700 in his wallet, and it disappeared. And then we called the police about it the next morning when he realized that, well, I guess he realized it that night, but it was, when we got home it was late, and so we didn't do anything about it. But then the next morning we called the police about it, and they went to hunt these kids up, and they were already gone somewhere, out of the state or somewhere. We never did get the money back. If in fact they found it. And maybe it just fell out. We don't know that. It was never turned up. Never turned up anyway. And that was a lot of money in those days. So then Steve borrowed money from my dad because he didn't have any money then. And I remember when he got home to Winburg, and Hackey, and that was Kate's husband, said, well, why would you borrow money from him? Why would you do that? He said, well, I didn't have any money. Well, what else would I do?
Oh, that's rough. Do you remember, what was it like when he proposed? And where did it happen, and how did you feel?
Oh, well, we had gone into Pittsburgh to visit this girlfriend who set the marriage up for us. And we had gone in to visit her. She had dropped out of school the year. She only went 2 years to high school, or to college. And she was from Brentwood in Pittsburgh. And we had gone in to see her. We had dinner with her at a restaurant. And it was after she left that he presented me with the ring. And he had spent money on this ring. And then we went up to, the next weekend we went to my parents' house, and we showed the ring to my mother, and she said, oh, that little finger never did straighten out, did it? That little finger. She didn't say a thing about the ring. So Steve was disappointed, of course. Anyway, that was that story. But then, and that was before that was when he was just, he was already in the Navy, but he had been home on leave, and that was when he lost the wallet, and when we got engaged and all that, and then he was gone for all that time. He didn't get home much at all. I don't think, because he was in the South Pacific. So.
Do you remember the proposal though? Was it a?
Oh well, it was just at the dinner table. It was nothing like getting down on your knee or anything like that. It was just he pulled this out and he said, well, here. Let's get married or whatever. And so I agreed to it. And then I said, after I got home that summer, and I talked to my parents, and they were so much against it. And so then I thought, well, what do I do now? Because I really thought, and I had already been to Winburg to meet his folks. His father died. I never met his father. He was a very strict, I think, very tough guy. And, well, he had to be. He came to this country and, raised his family, and it was not easy. And so I think he was pretty tough on Steve. I think he was tough on all the kids, but I never met him. But anyway, his mother was a wonderful lady, and his sisters were all very good to me, always. Yeah, always treated me like a sister.
So you felt,
yeah,
I'm going to go for it anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And at the time I wasn't even thinking about the schizophrenic thing, but in later years I realized that, boy, was that a smart thing to do. Get out of that gene pool, the beach woods, Yeah. So anyway, yeah.
So what did you admire most about Steve?
Well, probably the same thing that my dad admired in him, that he was not afraid to back down from anything. He would do it. Whatever it was he had to do, he would do. And when we had all the kids and he had to work all the time and had to work 3 or 4 jobs at a time, he did it. He was amazing. I don't know how he ever did it. I mean, he would do the taxes. He would teach during the day. He would do taxes at night up until 2 or 3 in the morning. He had the driving school. He had so many things going on. I don't know how he ever kept it all straight, what he was doing, where he was going next, but he did somehow. He was pretty amazing. I'd say very amazing.
What do you believe is the key to a successful marriage?
Well, I think it's, first of all, you have to realize it's not a 50-50 proposition. Sometimes it's 90-10. So you have to be, and I think it's, I think in raising children you have to agree on what you're doing. You have to be, I think my parents were great parents because, even though, my mother, we would go to my mother because we thought she was easier, and she would say, well, you have to ask your father. Dad would say, no, you can't do that. Or he would say, okay, well then we could do it. So I think you have to come to an agreement with your spouse about how to raise the children, because that's a big thing. And the other thing is the money. Money is a big contention in married life, I think. And we never had a problem with that because we never had much money in my marriage. There was not much money when we were raising 8 kids, and Steve was the only worker. But then later on I did go, I got my master's degree and I helped to put the girls through college, and so, because I knew I had to do that if we were going to get them through college. So, and then we lost Stevie, and of course that was the hardest thing. And John did get through college. So, but I think the hardest thing we had to do in our marriage was lose our son. Yeah.
How did you find out you were going to be a parent for the first time?
Well, we had gotten married in May, and we were living at Steve's house, and I had morning sickness. And Steve's mother said, oh, she's pregnant, I think she's pregnant. And I was. I went to the doctor, and yes, I'm pregnant. So, and that was probably we got married in May, and we were staying there for the summer, so I don't remember when that was in the summer, but anyway, the doctor confirmed that yes, I was pregnant, and so then we were moving to Wilkinsburg, where we lived in Wilkinsburg while he went to college and got his master's degree at Pitt. So we were in there, and your mom was born at Columbia Hospital in February, and I had taken a teaching job at Verona, and of course then I had to tell them I was pregnant, and so I retired. I resigned at Christmas time, and they had already given me a bonus, and $100 bonus, and they wanted the bonus back. And my husband got on the phone and said, well, a bonus is for services rendered, not for services in the future. And so we didn't give the $100 back. I don't think we were in very good standing with the Verona School District, but we sort of needed that $100 because Steve was making whatever they made as a student on the GI Bill. I don't know what, and it wasn't much. We were living in this apartment in Wilkinsburg.
It's a lot of money back then.
Yeah, it was.
How did you choose your children's names? Of course, there's a lot of them.
Well, we started with Lynn, and we didn't give her a middle name, and then we eventually did give her Elizabeth, and I'm not sure that she liked that, but anyway, that's what she got eventually. And then Keith, and Keith was named for Steve's old girlfriend. I thought that was a neat name for a girl, and so I chose it, and well, he agreed to it, and his family was appalled that we gave Keith this name, and I'm not sure that she's been happy with it, but anyway, it's been different, all right. And then Jeannie, and then because then Steve said, well, we need to name somebody after you because we were getting all these girls, so it was Jeannie, and so then I thought, well, we have L, K, and J. Maybe we'll just go with L, K, and J. The next girl that came along had to be with an L, so that was Lee, and then Kim, and then Jan, L, K, J again. And then the boys came along, so
I never heard
it was just a crazy idea.
Just a
Yeah.
mishmash of.
And then we had to pick a name that went with it, so that, because Lynn Shuster, Lynn Elizabeth Shuster, that sounds nice, and Keith Ann, and Jean Leslie, and Lee Ellen, and Kim Louise, and Jan Laurie.
Wow.
And then Stevie came along, and he was Stephen Howard after his dad and his grandpa and his other grandpa. And my dad was Howard, and Steve's dad was Steve, so Stephen. So.
And
Steve,
John.
And John was actually. I said, Lynn was 17, and I said we're going to call him John, but Jon, because we had her good friend Karen's brother was John, Jon. And I said, I like John spelled that way, and I said, since you're 17, I'm going to let you pick the middle name. So she picked Kevin as the middle name. So he's John Kevin because of your mom.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Because she was very upset that we were having a baby when she was 17. And in fact, I think Steve let her stay home from school that day because she didn't want to face the kids. Tell them she had a new brother. So anyway, we were so happy to have a new brother, but she was not.
Proudest moment as a parent? Maybe there's many, but
many. Oh gosh, that would be hard.
You don't have to answer that one in the case
Okay.
it would get you into trouble if you do.
Yeah, I'm just very proud of all my kids. I think they've all done well, and they're all hard workers, and they're all very they're not money grasping, wealthy looking for people. They're just hardworking kids, and they've all done well, I think. I'm proud of all of them. Really proud of all of them,
They're good people.
That's all I can say. Yes, they are.
I'm very proud of of the family.
Yes, we are.
And, and my wife comments about how much she enjoys it and how much she feels welcome and loved and has fun.
Well, I told Jan if she buys our house, she's got to have Thanksgiving.
Oh
She
my
said
God.
she would.
If there's anything we can do to help that happen, I think everybody in the family agrees, including all the cousins, that if there's a way to help, that we would all want to help because
at one point when Jan got her divorce, and she asked about the house, and I said, well, we'd love to have someone in the family have the house because Steve helped to build it. We planned it, and Steve helped to build it, and we'd like to keep it in the family if possible. And she was asking about it at that time, and But I think things have changed since she married Peter. I mean, he may want to go to Colorado or New Mexico or somewhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
When they retire, but we'll see.
What did your family enjoy doing together? The kids.
Well, in the summer we always went to, for Memorial Day weekend and for 4th of July and for Labor Day. We always went to the cottage in Bedford. And that was just a thing we did. And they all expected us to go, and we always went. And I always felt like we didn't spend enough time with my parents, although we did go. I did take the kids up there every summer, and we spent 2 weeks up there with the kids, and which was my way of dividing, at least, we didn't stay in Windber when we went. We just went for the day, and we went to Bedford for the day, to the cottage. But I always felt as if we gave a lot more time to Steve's family than we did to mine, because my family was 2 hours away, and his family was 1 hour away, which made the difference, It was too far to go 2 hours there and 2 hours back in one day, where it was only 1 hour to Windber and then 1 hour back, so it made a big difference.
Whose cottage? I'm sorry. What?
Mary and Barney had a cottage at
Okay.
at Bedford.
So that was Mary. Okay.
Bedford, and there was the
Oh, what?
river and boats.
I just didn't know how it came to be or
Yeah.
whose it was.
Yeah,
I
Mary and
remember.
Barney had it, and we went and stayed overnight several times there, and my kids enjoyed it because they enjoyed the river and taking the boat out, and I can tell you a story about Stevie. There was what would you call it? A place where they went up. I had to. Boy, I can't remember what they called it anymore. Anyway, it was not the river, but it was
Quarry? The quarry?
Yeah, the quarry.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a quarry there, and you had to climb up to it, and it was really deep, really. And Stevie, when he was 5 years old, dived into that. I was petrified when I heard about it. I didn't know he did it. There were kids with him. Some of the kids were with him. He was only 5. He dived into that thing, and then they came back and told me all about it.
He was swimming at the time?
He was
I mean,
swimming,
he was a
yeah.
swimmer.
Yeah, because we had all the kids take swimming at the Y early. Because of my uncle drowning, I wanted them all to learn to swim. So he could swim, yeah, but oh my God, that scared me to death.
You enjoyed the summer trips?
Yeah, we did, and we sometimes took other trips. Like one summer we took. I remember the first time we went to the beach. We went to the beach in Erie because I had friends who lived up there, and we would go up and stay with them and go to Erie Beach, But that was not like going to the beach. And so Steve and Jim Garrity, his partner in the tax business all those years, they had gone down to Salisbury, Maryland to audit some books for somebody they were working for. And they had gone down there, and while they were there, they went to the Ocean City, Maryland, which was close to there, and checked it out, and he came back and said, oh, we should go to the beach. And so we started going to the beach, and so we usually went to the beach every summer. My kids loved the beach, and they still do, and we did too. We liked it. It was a little worrisome at times with so many kids to keep an eye on.
Really? I don't know how you do. My God. And then, how did you choose to decide to go cross country?
Well, my sister Shirley lived in California, and she was not moving back. And so we said, okay, if you're not moving back, then we're going out to see you. And so we planned the trip, and Steve usually worked for a construction company in the summer, and so that summer he took 5 weeks. We took 5 weeks. We planned the whole trip and planned where we were going to stop and who we were going to stop and see and everybody along the way, and planned our trip, and we spent I think 3 days going out, and we spent 2 weeks with Shirley, and then we went to Mexico, and that was an overnight thing, and came back, and then we spent time with our friends the Stokeses, who lived in San Francisco area, Oak, whatever it is, Oakdale, Oak something, in that area. Anyway, we stayed overnight with them. We stayed a couple nights with them, and he went to Indiana with Steve, and he was a home economics teacher, but he became the principal of his high school in California. He married a girl from California because he was in the Coast Guard, and that's when he met her, and during the war. And so this was really great. He made steaks, T-bones for every kid had their own T-bone. That was unheard of in my family. We did never do that. So it was very exciting. And then when we were leaving, he had cooked turkey, and he sent turkey with us for our trip home. Yeah.
And this was where?
This was in, not San Francisco, but the Oak.
Oh, what outside of there.
Yeah, right. Oakmont, Oakdale, Oak.
No, Oakland.
Oakland, yeah. That's where they lived, and yeah. So that was a really nice visit.
I bet.
But when we were at Shirley's, we were there for 3 weeks, and they had rented a tent and put a tent in the backyard for the kids to sleep in. Talking about being at Aunt Shirley's in California, and they rented a tent and put it up in the backyard, and the kids slept in the tent, and that's how they accommodated us. I'm not sure how Jim enjoyed this. Lynn didn't go along because she was a senior in college, and she was finishing up college, and so she had a job. She had a job for the summer, and so she didn't come along. And then the next summer we sent her on the bus, and she went on the bus, and that's when she saw the Beatles. Remember that story? Yeah.
Yes.
But anyway, the kids slept in the backyard in a tent. And Steve and I slept in the house, and I think the boys slept in the house, and the girls slept in the tent. I think that's how they did it. And so it was. And they showed us, they took us to everything. They took us to the Disney, and I remember this especially with Kurt was 4 years old, and we were following Shirley. We took our car and she took hers, and we had 2 carloads, and we got lost from her. We got disengaged from her, and I said, "Oh gee, I don't know how to get home." And Kurt said, "Well, I know how to get home." He told us how to get home. 4 years old. He knew how to get home. Anyway, so that was that story.
Oh, okay. Where did they live?
They lived in. They had a beach house, Manhattan Beach. That's where they lived at that time. Yeah, that's where they lived at that time. Yeah.
I've been there.
Okay.
That's a great.
Okay.
What a neat place to live.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you could have had any other profession, what would it have been?
Well, I've often thought that if I were to do it over again, I would go into genealogy, the study of genealogy, because I think it's fascinating. And to avoid some of the pitfalls and so forth,
do you know why you didn't do that? You just didn't know about it?
There was no, I don't think they had that in Indiana at the time that I went, and I hadn't even thought about that, because when I went there I was going in music, and then I had to make a change in the summer. I had to change my mind what I was doing, so that's when I went with the chemistry. I thought, well, I could do something with that, which I never did.
Do you wish you would have gone to a, I don't know, like a bigger school or a city?
No.
I mean, of course, life would be totally different.
No,
but
not really, no. I like a smaller school, I really do. I would have been lost. A country girl going to a huge school, I would have been lost, I think.
Of all the things you learned from your parents, which do you feel was the most valuable?
Well, I think probably hard work and thriftiness.
Yes.
I'm a little Scotch, and I'm not sure that that's Scotch or Jewish. I was saying to Kim the other day, my ancestors that came from Germany were Hetrick, and my friend once said to me, well, if you were Heydrich, Heydrick, then you were Jewish, and yet they changed their name when they came to this country. I said, oh, I didn't know that. So I don't know, maybe we're Jewish back from Germany. I don't know. So I said to Kim, maybe that's why I'm so thrifty. Anyway, so if anybody wants to check on that someday. Oh my gosh.
What accomplishments were you the most proud of?
Well, I think I'm most proud of my family. My husband, my children, my family. I think that's what I'm most proud of. And it's so interesting to see what all these grandkids are going to do. And to watch them mature and make decisions about what they're doing. I mean, it's just amazing to me what different areas they're going into and what, I think we're going to have somebody doing everything in this family. We have enough kids to do it.
Well, it's like a garden that you planted,
Yeah.
60 years ago.
Yeah,
And
it is.
starting with Lynn.
And that's really what I'm most proud of, my family, because they've had obstacles in their pathways and they've overcome them. They've gotten through whatever they had to get through, and they've done it well. And I'm just proud of all of them. Yeah.
What is the one thing you most want people to remember about you?
Well, I hope they remember that I was a kind person and thoughtful. I've always tried to be. And I learned that from my mother and my grandmothers. They were that kind of people. Doing things for other people always and helping others. And in those days, that was what you did. I remember my mother taking food to people who didn't have anything and helping people out like that. And my grandmother did the same thing. My grandmothers did the same thing, especially my grandmother Crawford. I can't remember much about what my grandmother Smith did for other folks, but I'm sure she did things too. So it was just that kind of, they were, in those days, and it was a lot of it during the Depression or before that, and it was tough going, and they had to help each other out, and they did. And that was a good thing.
That's all the
That's
questions.
it. Okay.
Anything else that you
Okay.
wanted to tell about or talk about, or?
Well, let's see if there was anything else on my list. I had written down some things that you might want to know about, but I think we covered them all pretty well. Oh, I didn't tell you about the time I went for a date in a sleigh ride with my neighbor. He came with a horse and sleigh. We had made the arrangements for this date, and it was a neighbor of mine. And we'd never dated, but I knew him, And he came over, and here he didn't have a car, he had the horse and sleigh. So we just went for a ride in the country and came back.
How old?
I was in high school.
Okay.
Yeah. But that's the one and only time I ever went for. And I remember when I was a senior in college that we had such a bad winter that winter that my dad had to deliver the milk in the sled. They had a huge sled with no cover on it, and put the milk in there and covered it up with a huge blanket, and the horse took us to town, and they delivered the milk, and then he took me to Du Bois to the, I think his truck was in town, and the roads were better in there, and he took me to Du Bois to the bus station, and I went back to college and finished college. And it must have been March or April. Maybe it was April. I know it was close to the end of school. It wasn't my freshman year and it wasn't my senior year, but one of those years that it was really bad. And there was a lot of flu going around because I think that's how I happened to be home. I was home, I was sick, and I was home. I had the flu probably.
Did the milk freeze?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, was that a problem? No.
He had it covered. He had this. I don't know where he got that thing. It looked like a bear skin of some kind. It looked like some. He had that, and it was all bound all around the edges, and it was huge. And he just covered the whole. I think he had another blanket under that, and then that on top.
Bearskin.
And in the summer, I'm not sure it was a bear skin.
Oh.
It was some kind of skin. And I don't know. I didn't mention this, that we used to go skating down on the dam, and my dad could skate backwards. I thought that was remarkable that he could skate backwards. I never learned to do that. But, and they cut the ice out of the dam in the winter and put it in the sawdust and kept it for summer so they could put it with the milk in the summer to keep the milk cold. Did you know that? Yeah, that's how they did it. That's how they refrigerated the truck. We didn't have a refrigerated truck. So, yeah, he would chip up the ice and then take a big square of ice out of the we called it the ice house. It was across the road from the barn. And that's where they kept it. And he'd bring that up to the milk house and ship it off with the ice pick and put pieces of ice in each of the crates of milk.
And that ice would last all summer.
It would keep, it would last all summer.
Oh my gosh, they must have had a huge amount of ice.
Well, yeah, there was a lot of ice and a lot of sawdust to keep it from thawing, Yep. That's how we did it.
All right, well,
We had a
thank you.
big cooler that we kept the milk in, that we kept 10-gallon cans of milk in the cooler. And then my dad would dump it in this machine that we bottled from, the bottling machine. He'd pour the big 5-gallon or 10-gallon, I don't think it held 10-gallon, probably 5-gallon, and then I would fill those bottles, and it was a thing that you turned around, and it filled 4 bottles at a time, or I'm not sure, maybe 2 or 3, I can't remember. But then it capped them, and so that's what I did in the morning. In those cold mornings, that was no fun. Anyway, it was a great life. I had a great childhood. I really did. I was very fortunate.
Wow, it's very interesting.
It is. It's nice to talk about, and thank you so much for hearing my story.